Andrew Williamson here. Welcome back to Williamson Education. In our most recent lesson, we looked at two punctuation marks, the em dash and the parenthesis, that are relatively specialized in their usage. By this I mean that the marks should not be used all that often, and usually for the purpose of adding extra information to a sentence. Today, we're going to move on to explore one final set of marks that you will see in your encounters in the English-speaking world. These marks are the apostrophe and the quotation mark. Let's dive in and see how they work. We'll begin with the humble apostrophe, which looks like a comma floating in the air near the top of a line of writing. Apostrophes tend to be used for two main purposes, to indicate ownership and to form contractions. We have actually already seen some contractions before in our work on pronouns. You will recall the contractions its and their, for example, as important usages of the apostrophe. Contractions are single words that combine usually two words into one, omitting letters in the process. Take the word can't, for instance. It combines the words can and not into a single word using the apostrophe. Or take the word won't as a second example. It combines the words will and not into a single word. Finally, as a third example among many, take the word doesn't. It combines the words does and not into a single word. You will see these examples and many more in your everyday travels through the English-speaking world. The examples that I have given are certainly not the only ones out there, and you will come across others in the course of your journeys through the language. The second important usage for apostrophes has to do with the formation of possessives, or words that show that something belongs to something or someone else. Typically, a possessive is formed by adding either an apostrophe s or an s apostrophe to an otherwise singular noun. For example, let's say that we wanted to talk about my sweater. We might say, Andrew's sweater is blue. The apostrophe s at the end of Andrew shows that I own the sweater, that it belongs to me. Let's look at another example. Here it is. The seat's cushion is soft. In this example sentence, I suggest that the seat owns the cushion with my apostrophe s at the end of the singular noun seat. This is not a legal kind of ownership, but it is ownership in the grammatical sense of the term. Generally speaking, the apostrophe comes before the s when the person or thing doing the possessing is singular. When the person or thing doing the possessing is plural, however, the apostrophe comes after the s. Consider the following example. The student's parents decided to set up a playdate. Here, as you can see, students is formed as a plural with the s on the end of the word. In order to show that the several students all own those parents, we need to place the apostrophe after the s, not before it. Here's another example so that you can see what I mean. The whale's tails all splashed water on the audience in the boat. In this sentence, the apostrophe comes after the s to indicate that there are plural whales with tails splashing the members of the audience. Once again, apostrophes come after the s when the base noun in question is a plural noun. One exception to this rule has to do with nouns that are formed as plural in an irregular fashion. Think about nouns such as child, which is children in the plural form, or man, which is men in the plural form. With these irregular plural noun formations, the possessive is created by simply adding apostrophe s to the end of the plural noun. Children becomes children's, and men becomes men's. You'll learn all the ins and outs of possessive formation over time as you become more immersed in English speaking and writing environments. Those are the major considerations for apostrophes in English. Now let's turn our attention to quotation marks. Quotation marks look like double apostrophes that hang at the top of a line of writing. These marks can serve a variety of purposes, but their main function is to show that a given group of words was spoken or written by someone other than the person doing the speaking or writing. Native English speakers might be surprised to learn that our quotation marks are not the only way to indicate the quotation of another person. In French, the quotation mark looks substantially different from how it does in English, for example. The same is true in countless other languages around the world that have various means of indicating speech or writing belonging to another person. In English, though, our quotation marks look like double apostrophes hanging out the top of a line of writing. Consider this example, for instance. My dad asked, "Are you going to eat all of that food?" In my example, the question, "Are you going to eat all of that food?" was not written or spoken by the person writing the sentence, so this question needs to be placed in quotation marks. Notice also that when a quotation is integrated into a sentence, a comma is often required to introduce the quotation, as I have done here. I've said that quotation marks are used primarily to indicate the speech or writing of a person other than the person speaking or writing a given text. This is the official, formal use of quotation marks. A second, less official use of quotation marks is a bit less formal. This usage involves so-called scare quotes, or quotation marks used to indicate that a speaker does not fully accept a given word or phrase. Scare quotes are often indicated in speaking by a gesture of making quotation marks with one's fingers. This kind of quotation mark can be used to show that a given word or phrase belonging to another speaker is not completely correct. For example, let's take a look. Supporters of nuclear weapons often argue that they help ensure peace, but anyone who has thought deeply about this issue will believe otherwise. In this instance, I express some skepticism about the term peace by placing the term in scare quotes. The scare quotes show that I don't accept the term or the idea that other people have put forward because I believe that nuclear weapons are primarily instruments of war. And with that, my friends, we come toward the end of our unit on the punctuation marks in English. These are several of the most important punctuation marks in English. If you can learn how to use these 8 marks that we have covered together effectively, then you will go a long way toward improving the quality of your written English. I find that learning how to use punctuation effectively has an impact on spoken English too. Learning these marks will help you understand how to group phrases and ideas so that your spoken English is clearer too. There are other marks in English that we have not covered. Maybe you're familiar with the question mark and the exclamation point. These marks are relatively straightforward and do not require too much explanation. A question mark indicates a question, and an exclamation point indicates a sense of surprise or excitement. Or maybe you've seen the ellipsis before, that triple period. The ellipsis indicates some missing information, but it is used so infrequently that it does not deserve an entire lesson of its own. We've examined the vast majority of the important marks in good depth. As we come to the end of our unit on punctuation, remember where we began, with the idea that punctuation marks serve to group together words, phrases, clauses, and ideas. That's the fundamental unifying feature of all punctuation marks, this notion of grouping and showing groups. In the next class, we'll start our next unit. This next unit will cover an important and wide-ranging topic in English, the topic of idioms. Idioms are one of the most essential components of sounding like a native English speaker, and they are also rather difficult to master. We'll have the opportunity just to scratch the surface of the topic of idioms in our work together, so that you will have a foundation for approaching further work on idioms in your own learning. By the way, that phrase, scratch the surface, is a perfect example of an idiom, the first we can look at together. To scratch the surface means to touch on the most basic ideas of an otherwise deep and difficult topic. Scratching the surface means that you will not learn everything there is to know about a particular topic. You will have to take up the task of studying more on idioms on your own. With that, we come to the end of today's lesson on the final punctuation marks in English. I'll see you right back here next time for the next installment of the Spread the Word campaign. Oh, and don't forget, spread the word.